Good night. It's almost 9:30 p.m. I've had a wonderful day today. I went to not Walsingham. I've got that on my mind. I went to Sandringham and took my best friend, her daughter, and the granddaughters to Sandringham. I've been there loads of times on the buses because the bus goes in and out, and I've seen it all. I've never ever got off the bus. Only years ago, Dad took us there as children and took pictures, and I've been inside where the house is and everything. But we went to the play park. The children's one is brilliant. Looked at the cafe shops and participated. It was wonderful, and can highly recommend it. I had a lovely time, and then they took me to where I asked to go, where I've never been, Snettisham Beach. It's only 3 miles from where I live, but I've never been there because you need a car. There's no buses go there. A long walk from the only bus stop, which would be in Snettisham Village. I mean, it's a huge village, but it's not that huge with houses or anything, but they've got this wonderful beach, and they've got a wildlife one somewhere nearby, because my third daughter went there. But she said it's a long walk from where they park. But if she'd gone to the caravan end, it's just next to the sea. Anyway, I had a lovely time there. I'm having a fabulous time. I wish I had visitors all the time. It's really great. So now I'm going to be sharing with you Chapter 5 of the RITE, The Making of a Modern Exorcist, written by BAGLIO, and all the details are already up there on the other chapters. It's really a good book. I'm not going into details now. I'm just going to read. The title is The Opening Door, and it's from page 54. But before that, I'm going to just say 1 or 2 prayers, as I always do. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Angel of God, my guardian dear, to whom his love commits me here, ever this night be at my side, to light and guard, to rule and guide. Amen. Holy Michael, Archangel, defend me in this day of battle. Be my safeguard against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, I humbly pray. And do thou, Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, thrust down to hell Satan and all the wicked evil spirits who wander through the world for the ruin of souls. Amen. The words of C.S. Lewis, the Screwtape letters, they're very good to read. Dear Wormwood, everything is clearly going very well. I am especially glad to hear that the 2 new friends have now made him acquainted with their whole set. All these, as I find from the record office, are thoroughly reliable people, steady, consistent scoffers, and worldlings who, without any spectacular crimes, are progressing quietly and comfortably towards our Father's house. And the small one next is from John Milton's Paradise Lost. Confound the race of mankind in one root, and earth with hell, to mingle and involve, done all to spite the great Creator. So we're now going to begin the chapter 5, Opening the Door. The image of a desecrated church with satanic graffiti 666 and upside down crosses spray painted on the walls filled the large white screen behind the dais. These photos were taken in the chapel of an abandoned hospital just outside Rome, asserted the deep baritone voice of Dr. Marco Strano, a criminologist and psychologist with the state police, a brooding bald man with an intense gaze, made more pronounced by a set of thick black eyebrows Dr. Strano appeared right at home next to the gruesome images, elaborate satanic tattoos, self-mutilations, shattered storefronts blocked off by yellow crime scene tape that paraded across the screen. Because the blinds were shut and the lights were turned off, Father Gary did not bother to take many notes, but instead sat back and tried to digest it all. In recent years, satanic cults had been on the rise in Italy, and several high-profile satanic murders had grabbed attention in the Italian news. In 2001, 3 teenage girls stabbed a nun to death in a northern Italian town as part of a satanic ritual. In the fall of 2005, members of a satanic rock group, the Bestie di Santana, Beasts of Satan, were brought to trial for the brutal murder of one band member and 2 female friends, one of whom was shot and buried alive. As recently as 2007, a man with amnesia wandered into a police station in a town near Milan, covered with small puncture wounds and missing 3 liters of blood. Later, his blood was found splattered all over the walls of his apartment 70 miles away in the form of satanic writings. Police found upturned crosses and other satanic symbols there, even though the man had no recollection of belonging to any cult. Because millions of people are reportedly involved in the occult around the world, and the numbers are on the rise, the exorcism course would explain the ramifications to novice exorcists. This book, its chapter is called Opening the Door. Modern Satanism, say experts, borrows from a number of historical traditions, and its tenets are hard to pin down. There is no unified belief system, as some members of the same group may become involved for more abstract practices, while others do so for carnal. The Gnostics in the second century, heavily promoted the notion that Satan was a godlike being with certain powers. Later condemned by the Church as heretics, the Gnostics believed that the material world was too full of evil to have been created by a good God. Therefore, they proposed a dualist system whereby God was distant and unknowable, while Satan was the creator of the physical world. Later, in the Middle Ages, the Cathars took up this theory once again, even going so far as to say that the Catholic Church was established by the devil to mislead people. This emphasis on the material world having been created by Satan was not for the purpose of worshipping him, but to more powerfully oppose him. But this view was easily perverted by certain groups who put the devil on an equal footing with God. In the 18th and 19th centuries, on the heels of the revolutions in America and France, and in the midst of the Enlightenment, Satan's desire to rebel against God was cast as a bid for freedom. The Church, seen by some as being too authoritarian, was accused of repressing man's natural carnal desires. As a result, numerous groups sprang up, including the infamous Hellfire Club, led by the rake Sir Francis Dashwood, which, while not necessarily believing in the reality of a personified Satan, still espoused a hedonistic lifestyle involving supposed orgies and other debaucheries done in the devil's name. According to Father Bamonte, who also authored a book on the occult, there are two currents of Satanism. In the first, known as personal, adepts actually believe that Satan is a physical entity, a god who can be prayed to and who will grant certain privileges such as money and fame. It offers sacrifices, while in the second, known as impersonal, acolytes hold that Satan represents more of a focus or energy, a part of the cosmos that can be developed and used to serve them. In both the personal and the impersonal currents of Satanism, the power of the individual is exalted above anything else, while the 7 capital sins are celebrated. As Father Bamonte says, the key to understanding them is to know their motto. Do what you want. That is the only law. Beyond this basic view, the groups themselves can also be very diverse. Father Aldo Buonatuo, a member of the Pope John XXIII Community Association, has been working with ex-cult members for some time. Small in stature, Father Buonatuo sports a collegiate handsomeness and a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow. His appearance and mild demeanour seem completely out of place in the world of devil worship and murder. And yet, another of a book on the occult, Le mani occulte viaggio nel mondo del satanismo, The Hands of the Occult, a voyage into the world of Satanism. He is considered an expert on the subject and was recently asked to collaborate with the SAS. During the course of his work, Father Buonatuo has come up with different designations within satanic cults. The first, which he calls youth acid, consists of mostly young people into the physical trappings of Satanism, the hedonistic lifestyle, mixed with drugs, self-mutilation, paedophilia, suicide, and even murder to provide human sacrifices. The second designation, known as power Satanism, is more sophisticated, he claims, and counts as members of very wealthy and influential people who are said to sell their souls to the devil for the promise of power and riches, which are then used to ensure a perpetual state of strife, war, famine, economic instability, and such. The third designation he calls apocalyptic Satanism, which, as the name suggests, has as its goal the total destruction of life as we know it. Not surprisingly, he claims this is the most dangerous strain. While there is no denying that groups like the Beasts of Satan exist, and that they claim to kill in the name of the devil, the larger question is this: are these groups part of a bigger problem, or just deeply troubled kids? Similar to the satanic panics that gripped the United States in the 1980s and early 1990s, when cases such as the McMartin preschool trial, in which a group of teachers were accused of ritually abusing the students, turned out to be false, some critics wonder whether the church might be overreacting to a few isolated incidents. I think they need to do more investigation, because it's very dangerous to assume the wrong things, because there was a lot going on at that time which was true and is true, and it's you need thorough facts and investigations before you. Even this writer should have taken a definite cautionary thing before writing that. You can't let it off and go lightly. Italy has seen its fair share of scandals that, while garnering headlines, have failed to deliver. In 1996, for example, Marco Dimitri, the leader of a satanic cult called the Bambini di Satana, Children of Satan, was acquitted of raping a 2-year-old boy and a teenage girl during an alleged satanic ritual. I think that they got that wrong. Likewise, in 2007, the town of Rignano Flaminio near Rome went through its very own McMartin-style scandal when 15 students at a nursery school accused 6 individuals, including several teachers, of sexually abusing them in satanic rituals. A lengthy investigation, however, involving a number of child psychologists, failed to turn up any evidence. What about physical evidence? Don't they look at that too? Dr. Strano, for his part, does not believe the more sensational crimes attributed to satanic cults, such as human sacrifice, organ trafficking, and slavery, are going on to the extent that some people imagine. He thinks instead that many of these groups are just about rebellion, about young people doing drugs and perhaps becoming involved in petty crimes such as vandalism or theft. Well, they're a long way from sexual abuse, aren't they, those two subjects? Most of them do not even know what they're doing, he says. I hate when they write without more facts, you know. I do dislike it. There are always facts. Father Buonetuo, however, thinks differently. For the past 5 years, he has been running a cult hotline in Italy, counselling individuals and family members who are trying to get out of cults. They're real, they exist all over the world, not just in Italy. It is not true that they are isolated groups. I know of many in Jamaica, and some of the stories are very sad. That a 16-year-old kid suddenly wakes up and decides to start a group. There is always someone who gives them the permission. There is a territory. There is always someone who initiates the group with that doctrine, he says. The hotline has opened Father Buonetuo's eyes to the world that many people cannot imagine exists. The thing that is the most shocking... 57 home. Sorry, the pages are stuck. Is the amount of joy, that is shocking, joy, that these young kids, some of them 16 years old, get out of suffering and causing suffering for others. They celebrate death. If you read what some of the people from the beasts of Satan said, you would not believe it. While they are hurting someone, they rejoice in it. That's a big sickness, that. According to Father Buonetuo, the hotline gets around 20 calls a day. That's a lot. Running the gamut from ex-cult members on the run to people just seeking attention, which is a big thing. It can be hard to break away from these groups, in part because the destructive lifestyle is fueled by addiction. LSD, music, sex, and violence work together to form a kind of psychological dependence, he says. However, even while he is convinced that satanic cults pose a threat, he is quick to point out that the nefariousness associated with these groups does not necessarily have anything to do with the demonic. We have to be clear. The world of satanic cults is one thing, and demonic possession another. Well, demonic possession is very rare, but it exists. Satanism is more about an exterior thing, a cultural movement in which people perpetrate crimes such as fraud and, in extreme cases, murder. Some people in these groups do not even believe in the devil, but use him as a shield to victimize impressionable people. Demonic possession, on the other hand, is an individual thing, which, if it affects a person, does so on an internal and spiritual level, and that is correct. It's just with that one person, not in a group, but they may have begun in a group, but it ended up with just the individual. One, of course, could lead to the other, says exorcists like Father Belmonte. If a person were to enter such a group and, say, perform magic or certain rituals, that could open up the person up to demonic attack. Or, claims Father Belmonte, the individual could sign a pact with a demon and thereby open a doorway to direct contact with him. According to exorcists, a variety of factors can contribute to a person becoming possessed. I must take a drink, sorry. Thank you. Excuse me a moment. Excuse me. Sorry. I think I have hay fever as well as a cold. Okay, let me continue. The first thing to note, say theologians, is that demonic possession cannot occur unless God allows it for his purposes, for that person's life, for what God's going to do through them when they repent. It may seem contradictory, but according to the Church, while God does not wish evil upon any person, he does permit it for some good purpose, similar to temptation. Pardon me. In the case of someone with a very advanced spiritual life, such as a saint, and we have many of them, God allows Satan to test that person, like Padre Pio was all the time, in the hopes that the physical trials will give their soul sanctifying grace. That only comes from God. According to St. John Chrysostom, possessed persons can obtain a twofold benefit from their condition. In the first place, they can become more holy and good, and they do. Secondly, having paid the debt for their sins here on earth, they can present themselves pure before the Lord. It can teach them lessons for life too. They can go on living a very, very holy life, very different. Demonic possession in and of itself is not evil. It is not considered a sin. In addition, there is apparently no physical or otherwise inherent quality in a person's nature that predisposes him or her to becoming possessed. Demonic possession is not contagious, It's individual. One soul. Just one soul, not a whole heap. A person cannot become possessed by sitting in a room or living with someone who is possessed. But if people think that, like they did with COVID and stuff, it's just not on with this kind of thing. Generally speaking, say exorcists, one has to either open the door to the devil or be a victim of one who has opened the door. There are some ways the church says a person can do this. Occult ties. According to the church, becoming involved in the occult is a form of idolatry that goes against the first commandment and is a common way to come into contact with the demonic. In his book, Possession Diabolische ed Exorcismo, Demonic Possession and Exorcism, Father Bamonti lists the following occult activities that can potentially open the door to possession. Participating in a seance, forbidden. Frequenting a medium or magician, forbidden. The church makes no distinction between white or black magic, so it's all no. Using an amulet or talisman, especially if it is received from a magician. Transcendental meditation. The use of crystals, absolutely no, 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 no. And other such New Age practices that stress out of body experiences, divination, or the practice of automatic writing, practicing satanic rituals, especially signing a blood pact with a demon. The Bible is clear and rather graphic on the dangers involved in practicing magic and divination. No one shall be found among you who makes a son or daughter pass through fire, or who practices divination, or is a soothsayer, or an ogre, or sorcerer, or one who casts spells, or who consults ghosts or spirits, or seeks oracles from the dead. For whoever does these things is abhorrent to the Lord. Deuteronomy 18:10-12. The Catechism is also direct in its condemnation of the occult. All forms of divination are to be rejected. Recourse to Satan or demons, conjuring up the dead, or other practices falsely supposed to unveil the future. All practices of magic or sorcery by one attempts to tame occult powers so as to place them at one's service and have a supernatural power over others, even if this were for the sake of restoring their health, are gravely contrary to the virtue of religion. As Father Bamonti explains, however, just participating in a card reading or using a Ouija board does not necessarily risk possession, yet engaging in this activity repeatedly, he says, could start people down a path that could open them up to possession, either through a graver sin or through their own actions. One American priest on staff at the NAC in Italy related his experience helping a 16-year-old unbaptized girl who came to him. While playing with a Ouija board, the girl had contacted a spirit named Nick, who dared her to do things that are dangerous, such as driving her car in a rainstorm without windshield wipers, so she couldn't see. But things get worse. When she awoke one night with an overwhelming sensation of being surrounded by a darkness so thick it was choking the air out of her lungs. With no training in exorcism, the priest said a simple prayer of deliverance, and the problem seemed to go away. A curse. A curse causes the suffering of others through the intervention of a demon. Curses break up marriages, cause businesses to fail, induce illness, invite possession, and so on. Curses can be carried out in a variety of ways, say exorcists. Most are the result of magic formulas or rituals performed by a warlock or a witch. Sometimes a person is affected directly by ingesting a cursed object, and sometimes indirectly by possessing cursed objects. For example, many people go abroad, they go to these foreign countries, I'm not naming any, but there's traditions and things that have gone on in the history of the particular natives in that area, and they've made things that they sell to the visitors. But in the making of those objects, whatever they are, they can be many things, which I haven't got time to, because it's not in the book, I'm telling you. They carry a curse, and when those people get them home and put them up in their house, unfortunately they don't know that they've been created and made. That's not every object that people buy, but these things can happen, and they do happen. And they have a cursed object in their house, and it does affect what goes on and what happens. So you need to be careful when you buy things that you understand the culture in the place where you've bought it and all those sort of things, because this has been proven through history. So let me continue. That's why I like blessed objects, things that the priests are blessed, and they're blessed in your house. One Italian exorcist knew a very wealthy person who had tried to sell her house for many years without success. People would come to look at the house, leave enthusiastic and ready to buy, but then mysteriously never return to close the deal. The exorcist said many masses, but still the house remained unsold. One day, a charismatic nun came to visit and told the exorcist that something was hidden in a wall and that the house would be impossible to sell until the object was removed. So how would she know in the house where it was? Unless through prayer somebody could discern it, because you might take down every wall or strip things down and you might never find it. Depends on the size of the house as well. So let's read on. The owner of the house then asked her ex-husband, notice, who was an artist, if he had put anything inside a wall. Asked her husband. That's an ex, notice. Reluctant at first, he finally admitted. Good thing she divorced him, I'm going to say now when I'm going to read the next sentence. He finally admitted that he had placed a painting behind a wall when the house was being built in order to dedicate it to an evil spirit in the hopes of garnering favours. When the owner destroyed the wall in question, she found that it encased a painting that portrayed a satanic image. So it cursed the house, it cursed the sale. Goodness me. Goodness me. A week after the owner burned, that's the correct thing to do with cursed things, burned the painting, the exorcist claims 4 different people offered to buy the house. Praise the Lord. In all cases, say exorcists, the intent is the most critical part of a curse. The strongest curses, those causing the greatest harm, are those launched with true perfidy, when there is a familial or blood relationship between the victim and aggressor, such as a parent who curses a child. Now, why would you do that? What a terrible thing for a parent to do. Some signs that point to a curse, if you can't curse, you must bless your children, not do that. Some signs that point to a curse, say exorcists, are chronic depression and sickness, infertility, breakdowns in the family and marriage, financial difficulty, and a family history of suicide or unnatural deaths. Exorcists are quick to point out that experiencing one or more of these conditions does not necessarily mean a person is cursed. Other criteria must be weighed in all cases to determine demonic activity. The first people to be affected by a curse are often the ones who cast it, say exorcists. A jilted lover who goes to a magician to have a curse put on the girl who spurned him will perhaps fall into a dangerous pattern of returning to the magician for other reasons, such as to obtain a lucky charm, to win over a new girlfriend. According to exorcists, this could not only lead to financial ruin, but in extreme cases also to possession. Too many people believe in curses might seem far-fetched. However, casting and removing spells are widespread in many native cultures, including some that have embraced Christianity. Haiti, for example, is a predominantly Catholic country, yet voodoo is popular. Dedication to a demon. This category deals with people who belong to a satanic cult, specifically to harness the power of evil by dedicating themselves or family members to a demon. In the case of a child being dedicated as with a curse, the victim is blameless. It is said that parents sometimes offer newborn babies or even fetuses to Satan in black masses. Father Beaumonti is quick to point out, however, that any such gifts given in return by the devil are almost always fleeting and have the effect of dazzling people so that they give themselves over completely to the devil, becoming like slaves. A life of hardened sin. As defined by the Church, deciding to commit a sin is a free will choice to do evil rather than good. According to the Catechism, sin is before all else an offence against God. a rupture of communion with him. One sinner who became possessed as a result of his actions was Judas Iscariot, whom the Bible describes as having the devil enter him. According to the theologians, however, sin in and of itself is usually not enough to cause possession. Certain sins, such as worshipping false idols, however, can open the door to demonic possession. Sins can also be an impediment to liberation, say exorcists. It is said that the demon can latch on to a specific sin, such as an unwillingness to forgive. That's in many families, that. Accentuating it until the person is in bondage to that particular sin, until the person renounces this sin. He will have no chance to break the bondage and become liberated. In these milder possessions, says exorcists, a sincere conversion and a good confession is usually enough to liberate the person. Shortly after he had attended one of these lectures, Father Gary spoke with a seminarian, originally from the Midwest, who had had a frightening experience before entering the seminary. The two met one afternoon for a panino, that's Italian cake, nice things, at a busy coffee shop near the Trevi Fountain. Amidst the busy afternoon lunch crowd, they found a spot at the counter, and the seminarian told Father Gary his story. When the seminarian was a teenager, he and his friends had been bored. So they bought a book on spells at the local bookshop and then purchased some ingredients online. First, they decided to cast a spell, calling forth a particular spirit. Much to their shock, as they read out the incantations, which required that they make a pact with the devil for maximum efficacy, though they did not do it, a flame appeared and floated in the middle of the living room before disappearing. During another incident, a huge crow appeared outside his kitchen window. Even though there were no crows around the neighborhood, scared, they performed a different spell that made the crow disappear. According to the seminarian, however, it did not fly away. It vanished. Realizing that he was in over his head, he had thrown away the spell book the following day. He should have burnt it. The story got Father Gary thinking about what might be waiting for him when he went back to San Jose. He knew from the course that the occult was rampant in Italy and growing. Perhaps even more alarming to Father Gary was the fact that in the suburbs of major Midwestern city, where kids were relatively wealthy and had a lot of free time, the occult was far more widespread than people realized. Had he missed warning signs in his own parish? To Father Gary, the most interesting aspect of the lecture on satanic cults was the list hang on, I've let it jump. Let's jump the page. To Father Gary, the most interesting aspect of the lecture on satanic cults was the list of reasons people became attracted to such a world. While the traditional reasons have been trotted out by Dr. Strano, namely rock music, heavy rock I would think, and the lack of a strong family unit, which is quite normal in the modern times, perhaps most intriguing to Father Gary was new media. With the advent of the internet, not only were more kids coming into contact with exotic groups, but as one speaker said, the computer itself, as a tool of empowerment, played a role. Carlo Climati, who has written several books on Satanism and youth culture, coined the phrase new culture of isolation to describe how today's young people, yes, since COVID too, who often feel cut off from the family, friends and society, sometimes treat their computers as friends. How sad is that? In a sense, replacing the real flesh and blood neighbour next door with a keyboard and screen. Such a concept, whether true or not, made Father Gary wonder about his previous parish. It was clear to him that technology brought huge advances to people's lives. But what effect did this have on a spiritual level? We all need to pray together, don't we? The wonderful thing is to get together with people of like minds and hearts and souls and spirits and pray together. That's a wonderful thing. Can't do that with a machine, can you? With almost anything, one could want only a mouse click away. It was not hard to see how using a computer might give a person a sense of omnipotence. Well, personally, I find computers really annoying and frustrating and irritating when all these things crop up when you're doing something and they're a nuisance, because it's like when they upgrade your computer, it just gets messed up and you really get annoyed with it, because up come these things wanting you to do this and that with Microsoft, and you just want Microsoft interruption to get off your screen. Cool, no. So, without proper grounding, would unsuspecting kids be more tempted today than in the past to use these devices to seek occult knowledge, which might in turn open them up to the demonic? It is a possibility. It's not impossible. Once he had been called out by a parishioner who asked that he bless her house after her daughter had a nightmare and saw a shadow on the wall of her windowless room. How can you get a shadow with no... Of course, he had talked to the girl before performing the blessing, but had he dealt with the situation in the right way? Now he would know to ask if she might have dabbled with anything, such as a Ouija board, or tried casting spells downloaded from a website. At the same time, Father Gary did not want to make people paranoid or belittle their problems by pointing to a computer or a deck of tarot cards and saying, "Aha!" The key to the problem, he realized, was not the Ouija board or the tarot cards per se, but the person's desire to seek knowledge through them. More often than not, this pointed to a weak faith life. As one speaker in the course had said, where faith decreases, superstition grows. For Father Gary, that statement rang true. The Casa Santa Maria is a 16th century convent located in the heart of downtown Rome. The building had served as stables for the French cavalry when Napoleon had occupied the city. But in 1859, Pope Pius IX had given it over to the American bishops, who had it converted into the original NAC. When the NAC was moved to its present location, the casa became a residence for American clergy studying in Rome. Father Gary moved to the casa in late November. After finishing the continuing education program at the NAC, sandwiched between Piazza del Oratorio on one side and Piazza della Pilota on the other, the 5-story being, almost as large as half a city block, is deceptively tucked away from the noisy streets of Rome. Were it not for a gold plaque stuck to the wall of its rust-coloured exterior, one would not know it existed at all. Once inside, however, the picture was decidedly different, with trickling fountains, long breezy colonnades, and open courtyards offering an almost zen-like tranquility. Father Gary had no trouble settling into his new home among 75 priests from around the English-speaking world. As at the NAC, most of the priests were students and kept a busy schedule, attending lectures at the nearby Gregorian University all morning, or spending time in their rooms, noses buried in books about canon law. Pranzo or lunch was the big meal of the day. The priest dined in the large refectory under a fresco-covered ceiling, served by waiters wearing white jackets and ties. Afterward, the staff would set out trays of cookies in an adjoining tea room. For most of the priests, the centerpiece of their daily schedule was Mass in the small Romanesque church, located adjacent to the dining hall. For Father Gary, celebrating Mass in the tiny church alongside his fellow priests was an incredibly enjoyable experience. Father Gary already knew a few priests from the States and made new friends quickly. Still, because all were on tight schedules, they had little time to socialize, something Father Gary would later lament. It was fun to be there, but unless you really reached out, you could easily get lost in that place or be dead for a few days before anyone noticed. In order to combat this forced loneliness, a few priests had formed a group aptly named, poor priests, Lonely Hearts Club, which got together once a week to go out to dinner. Father Gary happily joined. I'm getting near the end now. Since he was taking only 2 classes, in the late fall, he had begun his twice-a-week course at the Angelicum on the Eastern Spiritual Masters. He had plenty of time to read about exorcism, which he usually did in the mornings. There were a few religious bookshops that he would frequent along Via della Conciliazione, the wide, majestic avenue filled with Vatican offices, churches, and religious memorabilia shops that runs from the castle of St. Angelo to St. Peter's Square. Many of the books were in Italian or Latin. but a few bookshops, such as the Ancora, had a decent English section tucked away in a tiny attic-like space upstairs. He soon found out that while it was easy to find a book on Thomistic philosophy, it was not so easy to find one on exorcism. He didn't write much about it in the past. Instead, most of his research was done at the NAC library, located on the second floor of the massive seminary. The library had the largest collection of English language books in Rome, over 64,000, including huge sections on reference theology and church history. Gracious and down to earth, Sister Rebecca personified the Norman Rockwell image of a librarian, conservatively dressed, short, curly, blondish white hair, and a pair of glasses dangling from her neck on a long brown strap. A Benedictine from a parish in Indiana. She had been serving at the NAC for 11 years when Father Gary walked through the door. Yet in all those years, she could not recall being asked about exorcism. Father Gary told me he had been nominated as an exorcist, that he didn't know anything about it, she says. Excuse me. I thought exorcism was not real. Nonetheless, being the accommodating soul that she was, she gladly helped him locate a few titles. Most of the books were somewhat outdated when it came to exorcism, some written in the 1930s. Because of his skeptical nature, Father Gary preferred books by writers not inclined to see demons around every corner or blame all the world's evils on the devil. One book, Diabolical Possession and Exorcism, was by Father John NICOLA, an American priest and theologian, who for many years was an advisor to the American Catholic bishops on exorcism, as well as technical advisor for the 1973 film The Exorcist. Father Nicola's book stood out for its measured approach, describing how science and religion must work in concert, and how an exorcism should be considered only as a last resort. I thought it always was. Father Nicola writes, "Whenever I express a fear and unwillingness to act as an exorcist, I get letters from people assuring me, I don't believe what I'm reading, that they have successfully cast out many demons, and that as long as one relies on the power of Christ, there is no need to fear the demons." But why would ordinary people want to think they should do that and can do that? That bothers me a lot. It is my conviction that they are thinking of something entirely different from what I am. I have to agree with him. Solemn public exorcisms are rarely performed in modern times in the Western world, but they are undoubtedly when they're needed if it's assessed correctly. When they are performed, they are as gruesome and ugly as anything in the world. But anyone who's been through that understands exactly what he's saying. Such passages, when coupled with the information from the lectures he was attending, gave Father Gary an increasingly clearer understanding of the scope of the demonic, at least in the abstract. So that is the end. We've gone to 1 hour, 5 minutes or so. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to just write stop before I forget where I stopped. Thank you so much for listening. May God bless you and heal you. I'm sending you his peace in abundance, and may you always be happy and joyful in the Lord. So it's now 22:35. I think I'm going to bed. I'll upload that sometime, but it won't be right now. And I'm not sure. Let me quickly put my glasses back on. I'll tell you the title of the next chapter, chapter 6. So the next title, I don't know when it will be done. In My Name. Father Francesco Bamonte wrote something at the very beginning of it, and the title is In My Name. And I can tell you what he said. The devil takes advantage of all the possibilities he has to act in the world, hoping to carry as many people as possible with him to eternal damnation. This is because of the hate he harbours for God and for mankind. He would destroy the good in the world in any possible way, but we are protected by the action of God, Mary, the angels and saints, all of whom he put limits on his actions. So that's hopeful, isn't it? So that's the next chapter, and that's what that will be about. God bless you. Thank you so much for listening. Enjoy the weather, enjoy the summer, and stay safe. Sending peace, prayers and blessings. Bye-bye.